Hello, world. So I am not a YouTuber and I am not in the habit of making these videos. And there are going to be a lot of ums and ahs in this video. And I don't yet have the skills or the time to edit it. So I ask you to bear with me as I have a go at doing this. I am a Palestinian rights activist of some description. I've been involved in Palestinian rights activism since 2012 for the past 13 years. And I also follow left-wing YouTube somewhat. And I just want to comment on the Reddit post posted by the famous and renowned YouTuber Contrapoints. And a number of videos have been made about this by supporters of Palestinian rights, and I find them to be unbalanced, unfair, and a little bit hysterical. Uh, Folks, um, we're on the same side here. I want to see a free Palestine. I want to see the dismantlement of Zionism, which is a racist ideology. In terms of its practical effects, that's certainly what it is. And and yet, I don't think that we advance our cause by demonizing people like ContraPoints or kind of treating them unfairly. So let's get into it, okay? I will screen share and we can look at this posting by ContraPoints together and have a think about it together. Okay. So I will read it out loud and then I will interject my own comments as I see fit. Thoughts on IP, Israel Palestine. I'm posting this to Reddit instead of Twitter, hopefully to minimize fragments being clipped out of context. Sincerest apologies to the mods. So, many leftists feel betrayed because I haven't made a video on Palestine. Do they actually want a ContraPoints video about Palestine? Okay, so I will start by commenting on that. We would like as much support as possible. What is happening right now is the greatest crime against children in living memory. So yes, ContraPoints, we would like as much support as possible from you. If you are able to give the Palestinians your unequivocal support and to use your platform to call out the genocide and help bring about the necessary change in public consciousness that will enable us to bring an end to this genocide, we would really appreciate that. Okay, so yes, please, please do consider making such a video, even if it means, um, even if it means sort of changing your artistic style because you don't think this topic is, suitable topic for political satire as you go on to suggest. Okay, so yes, if you're willing to, yes, otherwise, just find other ways to support the Palestinian cause, share online petitions, okay. Do whatever you can to call out this genocide. Anything that you do will be enormously appreciated. Okay. Will they be happy if I get in the bath and pour milk on a mannequin of Benjamin Netanyahu? No, whatever, okay? The point is that we would appreciate your support. I have posted about Gaza occasionally and have quietly given money to Palestinian aid organizations. Okay, great. But what we really need is your voice. What we really need is you utilizing your platform to help bring an end to a genocide, to help bring an end to the worst attack on children, the greatest crime against children within living memory. But I think what leftists really want is for me to join their chorus of anger. Okay, so this is not, okay, I'm going to try to fairly represent ContraPoints here, but when you describe what leftists are doing as a chorus of anger, it's you who is maligning the leftists at this point, not the leftists maligning you. Leftists are putting out a broad range of material, and um, there's more to it than just anger, right? In the first instance, it's an expression of compassion, and that compassion may sometimes be expressed with a lot of anger, or it may sometimes be expressed calmly and with a great deal of reflection, and every single possible gradation between. Okay, so describing as a chorus of anger is you maligning us, you maligning the Palestinian rights activists. They sense some hesitation on my part and are judging me very harshly on my presumed opinions, not necessarily just on your presumed opinions, ContraPoints, but also on your silence. This is the greatest human rights abuse in living memory. It is the greatest attack on children in living memory, and we hope. We really want you as an advocate of human rights to get on board, okay? I'd rather be judged on my actual opinions, so here they are. So again, you weren't being judged on your presumed opinions only, you were being judged on your silence as someone who presents themselves as a champion of human rights. Is Israel committing genocide in Gaza? Yes. Do I oppose it? Yes. Do I feel angry about it? Yes. Okay, great. So let's give ContraPoints credit where credit is due. It's great that she acknowledges that a genocide is happening in Gaza. It's great that she opposes it without equivocation. It's great that she recognizes it as wrong. Yet I also feel a lot of other things. I think this is entirely reasonable for ContraPoints to say that she also feels a lot of other things. This is not a valid basis for criticizing her, in my opinion. One, doom. The week after October 7, it was clear that the mood among Israeli leaders and civilians was overwhelmingly kill or be killed, existential panic, and unstoppable lust for revenge. It reminded me of the US after 9/11. There was no reasoning or protesting them out of it, nor was it politically feasible for the US to withdraw aid to Israel on a time frame that would make a difference. It would have required replacing most of Congress and overturning decades of bipartisan strategy and diplomacy. Even in the best case scenario, it would have taken years, so there was a sense of futility. Okay, so I think generally speaking, I find this somewhat unobjectionable. I think if we're being honest, most of us within the Palestinian rights community also felt that same sense of doom. I know that there are Palestinian doctors living outside of Gaza who tried to travel to Gaza immediately after October the 7th, before Israel started bombing, because they knew what was going to come. So I find this unobjectionable. The only thing that for the most part, the only thing that I have some um, uh, reservations about is um, the statement that the mood among Israeli leaders and civilians was overwhelmingly kill or be killed, existential panic, and unstoppable lust for revenge. I don't think that that captures the entire picture. I think that people like Benjamin Netanyahu seized upon October the 7th opportunistically, one might almost say gleefully, to use it as a pretext for carrying out a genocide that they had been uh, planning for a long, long time. For example, if you were to read the 2006 book, Politicide, Ariel Sharon's War Against the Palestinians by the late Professor Barak Kimmerling, Israel's greatest ever sociologist, as some might say, you will see in that book that he makes exactly this point, that Israeli leaders are looking for a pretext to carry out a genocide. He felt that what they were doing at that point in time, in 2006, 19 years ago, didn't quite qualify as a genocide. He said that they were carrying out political genocide or politicide, which is seeking to destroy the Palestinians as a political entity without seeking to carry out what would meet the criteria for a genocide, actually trying to kill them as a people. Okay, but that is the only equivocation that I have about that particular paragraph. I find it unobjectionable that ContraPoints says that she felt a sense of doom. Let's move on to the second point, misery. The leftist pro-Palestinian movement quickly decided that their primary goal was not merely opposition to the genocide, but opposition to Zionism in general. That is, opposition to the existence of Israel as a Jewish state. And here they decided to draw the line separating decent people from genocidal fascists. Okay, so I have, again, I have an element of sympathy for the point that ContraPoints is seeking to make here. Um, I think that it would have been beneficial if the entire focus of the marches and demonstrations, for example, had been on trying to stop the mass destruction of Gaza. You know, the discussion about Zionism and Palestine and so on is a legitimate one, but we do also need to be strategic. So I find this, you know, reasonable. I might not totally agree with it, but at least I find it reasonable. So anyway, and here they decided to draw the separating line, separating decent people from genocidal fascists, which had the following consequences. One, it shrunk the coalition. Zionist is a very broad category. Most Jews are Zionists. Anyone who supports a two-state solution is a Zionist. Okay. Well, Zionism has in the past been a very broad category. Uh, it's becoming less of a broad category because liberal Zionists are basically realizing that liberalism and Zionism are incompatible because Zionism, as it actually exists in 2025, is a genocidal ideology seeking the destruction of the Palestinian people as a people. Most Jews are Zionists. Again, there's a broad gradation of opinion among Jews between those who unequivocally identify as Zionists through those who feel a connection with Israel but wouldn't necessarily consider themselves Zionists, through those who are non-Zionist and apolitical, to those who are anti-Zionists. So, yeah, I'm not sure about the exact statistics, but there is a broad spectrum of opinion among Jews about Zionism. Anyone who supports a two-state solution is a Zionist, not necessarily, because you can support a two-state solution that would allow for equal rights that and still oppose the existence of a Jewish supremacist state. Two, it was politically infeasible. I think she means unfeasible. Um, that's the word I use. Uh, what is the pathway that takes us from the present situation to the dissolution of Israel as a Jewish state? I don't see how this could happen without either a total internal collapse of Israeli society or else, nuclear war. As usual, leftists have championed a doomed cause. Okay, so I think that this is kind of based on a little bit of a misunderstanding, in as much as you can be anti-Zionist and still support the existence of Israel as a state for all its citizens. In fact, there are non-Zionists in Israel who support Israel as a state, but they don't support Israel as a Jewish supremacist state. Okay, so ContraPoints is again confusing anti-Zionism with the wish for the dissolution of Israel as a state. The two things are not the same. As usual, leftists have championed a doomed cause. Maybe, maybe not. Maybe this is an assumption that you're making based on your own superficial understanding of Zionism and the uh, shades of opinion within anti-Zionism and non-Zionism. Three, it introduced dangerous ambiguities. The vagueness of Zionism as a political Satan enables all kinds of rhetorical abuses. On the one hand, right-wing Israelis hold up all anti-Zionist protests as existentially threatening and inherently anti-Semitic. On the other hand, there is a long history of anti-Semites using the term Zionist in deliberately equivocal ways, Zog, etc. Anti-Semites are happy for the opportunity to misappropriate the now popular anti-Zionist label to legitimize their agenda, and many people are not informed enough about anti-Semitism to recognize when this is happening. These problems are mutually reinforcing. So I think that ContraPoints has a point here. However, um, what is significant is the point that she is not making, which is that it is the state of Israel and the actions of the state of Israel in carrying out a genocide whilst identifying as a Jewish state in dropping 2,000-pound bombs um, on civilian populations from fighter planes emblazoned with the Star of David, that is the main driver of anti-Semitism. And to fail to make that point whilst criticizing leftists for what they're doing is kind of an instance of failing to see the wood from the trees. So again, ContraPoints is not entirely wrong in what she's saying. I do have a degree of sympathy for it, but what she's not saying is also of significance. 3. Dread. The online left has spent the last 20 months distributing hundreds of photos and videos of dead Palestinian children. The main effect of this has been to create a population of people in a constant state of blood-boiling rage with no consequential political outlet. I fear this may be worse than useless. Anti-Semitism and anti-Zionism are conceptually not the same, and conflating them is dangerous. But in practice, the way Israel is perceived does seep out into attitudes towards Jews in general. Again, blaming the way that Israel is perceived as a driver of anti-Semitism, rather than Israel's actual behavior, whilst self-identifying as a state that represents all Jews, is kind of a bit imbalanced, to say the very least. I don't think Jews who feel isolated and wary in the current atmosphere are simply hysterical or hallucinating. Yes, there is communal trauma and hypervigilance. Yes, there's disingenuous right-wing calls, dismissing and censoring all criticism of Israel on the pretext of fighting anti-Semitism. But there is also a valid fear of historical anti-Semitic patterns recurring, and that fear gives rise to the right-wing claim that it is only Israel that can keep Jews safe. Okay, so I completely disagree with this. The anti-Semitism uh, that exists right now, such as it is, has nothing in common with historical anti-Semitic patterns of um, uh, uh, anti-Semitism. Nothing whatsoever. And Jews are not in significant danger right now because they are part of the establishment class in the US, in the UK, where I live, and in all other countries. Basically, they occupy a, a privileged position. They are, they are overrepresented in all metrics of privilege, and they are regarded as white people, basically. Um, so no, that it's just factually not true. Um, yeah, so no, that only, yeah, and this gives rise to the right-wing Zionist claim that only Israel can keep Jews safe. Okay, again, that is absurd. That is just that is absurd on the face of it because it's quite clear and quite obvious that it's way more dangerous to be a Jew in Israel than it is to be a Jew in the US or the UK. So I don't have any sympathy for this. I don't think it's factually accurate. I don't think the anti-Semitism that exists at this time, such as it is, has anything in common, really, with historical anti-Semitism. It's very, very different in many, many ways. Does this mean Israel should not be criticized and sanctioned? Absolutely not. But it's something I don't want to risk contributing to if not outweighed by tangible benefits. So I approach the issue cautiously. Again, I don't want to jump down ContraPoint's throat here, but I don't know if you know why you're approaching the issue cautiously. I'm skeptical whether you really possess the level of self-insight that you claim to, uh, and whether or not you're not just sort of catering to um, powerful interests here, perhaps unbeknownst to you yourself. And, you know, what is missing from this paragraph? What is missing from this paragraph is just heartfelt concern for Palestinians and a sense of uh, passionate commitment to trying to end this terrible, evil wrong that is being perpetrated from them. Our ContraPoints appears to have deep empathy for the sensibilities of Jewish people in the US, I presume, the UK and elsewhere who might be feeling a bit uncomfortable, but is not demonstrating equivalent empathy for the feelings of Palestinian children and mothers and fathers and elderly people who are living in absolute misery. So it is a case of one-sided empathy. 4. Bitterness. Much of the online left spent all of 2024 single-mindedly focused on Palestine and the complicity of democratic politicians in sending aid to Israel. This campaign had the following effects. 1. 0 Palestinian lives were saved. Not one fewer bomb or bullet was fired by the IDF. You don't know that. We don't know that. We don't know that because we don't get to see what the world would be like if the protest movement hadn't taken place. It's not unreasonable to assume that lives may have been saved. It's not unreasonable to assume that if no attention had been shown to what was going on, if no one had been protesting uh, against what Israel is doing, that they wouldn't have acted with far less restraint than they have. So this is, yeah, again, we just don't know. I would assume that the opposite is the case. I would assume that Israel would have behaved with far less restraint if no one had been protesting their actions. That is not an unreasonable assumption, given that at every single stage they appear to be sort of getting away with as much as they can get away with without incurring serious sanction. Two, it may have slightly contributed to the re-election of Trump, guaranteeing that the US will put no diplomatic pressure on Netanyahu for at least 4 years, and making protest against Israel both much riskier and less effective. Trump is also, incidentally, a menace to me and basically everyone I care about. A perfectly enlightened being would feel no bitterness about this, but I do. Okay, so it's not unreasonable for ContraPoints to feel bitter about the election of Trump. Okay, that is reasonable. ContraPoints is deserving of compassionate concern, and her feelings of feeling targeted by the Trump administration as a transsexual are obviously based in fact, in as much as the Trump administration has sought to roll back transsexual rights. So it would seem, I'm not an expert on this topic by any means, but that would appear to be the case. Um, so we can have compassionate concern, the ContraPoints there, but we do need to look at whether or not it's reasonable to blame the online left. So let's have a think about this, or let's look at this from another perspective. Well, again, I'm not an expert on this subject. I'm not an expert on US polling data, but I am a regular viewer of Secular Talk, Kyle Kulinski. Very much recommend Kyle Kulinski and Secular Talk to anyone who hasn't yet watched them. Please do. Please subscribe to Secular Talk. He's an amazing YouTuber. And what Kyle said is that the data shows that Democratic voters, or a significant chunk of Democratic voters, decided not to vote at all because they were so dismayed by the Democrats for funding and supporting a genocide. And this was a red line for them morally. They weren't influenced in their decision making by the pro-Palestinian left. They were influenced in their decision making by Joe Biden sending weaponry to Israel to enable it to carry out a genocide. So yes, feel bitter, but don't blame the online left. Blame Joe Biden and blame Kamala Harris for failing to promise to, for, well, I think she did say she wanted to end the fighting. She did appear to be better on the issue than Joe Biden. I wish she had been elected rather than Donald Trump. It would have been much better. But what she didn't do was to appropriately criticize Joe Biden, quite frankly, for his role in facilitating this genocide, and promise to be not just a little bit better, but much, 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 much better. Okay. None of this is the fault of the Palestinians, of course, who are overwhelming the victims here. I hope that someday American policy will shift in their favor, and I will continue to support that course. Okay, great. So let's please give ContraPoints some credit here. Let's not demonize ContraPoints. Okay, we disagree with her, but we can have compassion for her, and we can credit her for what she gets right. We can credit her for acknowledging that there's a genocide. We can credit her for demonstrating a degree of compassionate concern for the Palestinians. Okay. TLDR, too long didn't read. I see the situation as bleak, intractable, extremely divisive, and devoid of any element that could be appropriately transformed into political entertainment. That's why I haven't made a video about it. Again, I get it. I get it. It does make sense. Uh, it does make sense on its own terms. And all I would say is that we, or I, speaking for myself, appreciate you as a tremendously intelligent and thoughtful political commentator. I, speaking for myself, appreciate you as a powerful advocate for human rights, and we would just simply appreciate any and all support that you can give. And I will say this, what Israel is doing is not just a crime against the Palestinians, it is a crime against our shared humanity. You know, that role that the Israel lobby is playing in trying to dehumanize Palestinians and trying to make what Israel is doing somehow acceptable is an attack on our shared humanity. And even if we can't help the Palestinians or can't help them as much as we would like to, because I don't accept that it's having no effect at all, or at least I think that's extremely unlikely, we can still act and speak in defense of our shared humanity. And we would like you, ContraPoints, to be part of that project. Hopefully it goes without saying that these are just my thoughts. I'm sure other bread tubers have different opinions. So what I would say is let's please show ContraPoints some love here. Let's please show her some grace. Let's please not demonize her. And let's please appeal to her to show courage in her compassion for the Palestinians. That's what I've got to say on this topic.